How'd they make this easy? Understand.
Show some of your, are you going to show some pictures or figures or anything tonight?
The engineer has in his report, I believe, photos that he sends. You should have a report. I still can't get out of your visual here. Let me see what I could do. Please make me go away. How about like that? How if I just click off? No.
Should be a button at the bottom that says stop video.
Yes, that's the one. I wanted to do that.
It's near the mute. Yeah, there you go.
Am I going away?
Yeah. Okay, we have a good number of folks assembled now.
We are live, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, all. Welcome to our Monday, December 13th, 2021 Historic Preservation Commission meeting. I would like to call this meeting to order at 6:35 p.m. Secretary Henderson, can you please read the notice of compliance?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The notice requirements provided for in the Open Public Meetings Act have been satisfied. Notice of this meeting was properly given and published in the North Jersey Herald and News on November 29th, 2021, and filed with the clerk of the city of Paterson on November 29th, 2021, and posted in the Paterson City Hall immediately thereafter.
Thank you. Tim, can we have a roll call?
Commissioner DeLeese.
Present.
Commissioner Garcia Leon.
Here.
Commissioner Ahmed.
Here.
Commissioner Corbo.
Here.
Commissioner Redmond. Commissioner Vice Chair Rafael.
Absent.
Commissioner Simpson.
Here.
Commissioner Walter.
Present.
Commissioner Walter.
Present.
Chair Tate.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, we have.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to skip down on our agenda to item number 7, new business. We have an application under item A, which is 9-11 Spruce Street, aka 70 Spruce Street, aka Great Falls Industrial Park. Design review of proposed demolition of building number 13, the machine shop at former Dolphin Jute Mill site. This will be presented by G. Masucci Architects LLC, a degree of Freedom Structural Engineers on behalf of Great Falls Industrial Park Incorporated. Executive Director, could you provide us a report for this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to provide a report to get us started.
Thank you.
Executive Director and Chairman, just wanted to let you know, this is Kelly. I've just signed in. I know, Tim, you were just finishing your attendance, but I wanted to let you know that I'm here and present.
Confirmed. Thanks, Vice Chair.
Okay, I just clicked up on a photo of the subject property. Can everyone see it?
No, it's not presented.
Right, we just see the agenda.
Still the,
Okay.
We can see it now.
Okay, very good. I'm going to try to switch over to can you see that map?
Yes.
Confirmed.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, very good. I'm going to start with a photo. The Great Falls Industrial Park, aka the Art Factory, submitted a design review application requesting to demolish building number 13 on the subject property. Number 13 is a 1.5-story gable-roofed brick industrial building constructed circa the 1910s as the machine shop for the Dolphin Jute Mills complex. Alongside of the building is adjacent to Barber Street Sidewalk. According to the owner, number 13's roof was badly damaged in Hurricane Sandy in 2012 and has continued to deteriorate and disuse since then. This is over 10 years ago. The building has become a concern for pedestrians' safety on the Barber Street side, which has prompted this demolition application. I'm going to switch over to the other. So we see here on the tax map the subject property outlined in red. It's lot 4802. Block 4802, lot 22. And I'd like to first go to these photographs. I have the ability to show you the building 13 using these air photographs from the Historic American Engineering Record. Now, these are not contemporary photographs. They go back to about 1973, but they're great aerial images to be able to show the complex from an overview, and building 13 is shown outlined in red. You can see the parking lot is sort of in front of it along Spruce Street, and Barber Street runs along the side of it. And it's adjacent to the Morris Street property that the HPC was working on with the applicants to adaptively reuse the rear of the granite mill property to a charter school. So that's one of the photos, and here's another view showing Spruce Street and the parking area, and then Building 13 again, highlighted in red. You can see again, it's sort of a 1.5 story, low-pitched gable roof, characterized as a machine shop. And I can show you some of the site development mapping as well. Again, give you a broad perspective of the site development. The first map, Sanborn map on screen is from 1899. And you see the subject property outlined in red. And down here in the lower right corner, two pink buildings are shown. One is called a finishing. Later on, so the machine shop in 1899 does not appear in this location along Barber Street. So we'll go down to the next map of the Sanborn fire insurance map from 1915, and now we do see the machine shop. The other two buildings in that corner of the property have been removed, and the machine shop is showing. So this quick map reconnaissance shows that the machine shop was erected sometime between 1900 and 1915. Showing the Morris Street property or the Granite Mill property, the Barber Flax Spinning Works complex. We can see the main mill or the granite mill that was converted to adaptively reused as a charter school several years ago. And behind it, storehouse number 1, which was part of the recent adaptive reuse of the rest of the site. There was also a machine shop adjacent to the property line on this side of the property line, which was replaced with a gymnasium for the school. And then further, and kind of a later Sanborn map, this map is dated probably circa 1930s, and we still see the machine shop in situ, and there's very little site development shown on this map from the previous 1915 map. So a lot of these structures are sort of static, and as they were since the last map I pointed out. So just some quick map reconnaissance, and again, the photos showing the relationship between Building 13 and a number of the other mills in the district, including up here on the upper left corner, the Levine Reservoir, and even the Spruce Street Bridge can be seen at the top of the photo, and the river. So I think these photos are useful for contextualizing the location of Building 13 within the complex. So let me keep going. This is the former Dolphin Jute Mills complex. It's currently identified as the Great Falls Industrial Park, and today also known as the Art Factory. The Art Factory uses the industrial campus as an event venue, artist space, and as a filming and photography destination. Overall, the campus of industrial buildings is intact and expresses a high degree of architectural integrity. The property's history as a manufacturing force is legible and critical to interpretation in the Great Falls Historic District. The former Dolphin Jute Mill complex is within the boundaries of the Great Falls Historic District and is listed on the City, State, and National Register of Historic Places. So just real quick for, we've probably heard this at some point in the past, but just a little background on the complex. The Dolphin Jute Mills complex originally started as the American Hemp Company, and it was founded in the 1840s. The buildings were constructed. The first buildings were constructed along the Upper Raceway, and were powered by water wheel. In the 18th, the American Hemp Company switched from processing hemp to jute. In 1851, the company reorganized as the Dolphin Manufacturing Company. So Dolphin's formation aligned with rising demand for jute products. This necessitated more power, more workers, and more buildings to support this factory. By the 1880, Dolphin transitioned to coal-fired steam power. This shift further increased productivity, which called for additional buildings to accommodate operations. It included the new buildings included a new 3-story mill building and an engine house. By 1881, Dolphin was the largest jute manufacturer in the United States. In 1891, Dolphin changed its name to Dolphin Jute Mills. This distinction represents the firm's singular focus. By the end of the 19th century, Dolphin was planning the installation of a 1,200 horsepower steam engine to drive the entire complex. In 1901, the engine was installed and the obsolete water turbines were subsequently removed. By 1915, Dolphin began using petroleum fuel. When Dolphin closed in the 1950s, petroleum fuel was used exclusively. So after Dolphin closed, the property was used for warehousing and light industry, and then Great Falls Industrial Park purchased this property in 1978. So the machine shop was, again, was constructed as, we'll tell you a little bit about the machine shop now. The machine shops, such as 13, were integral to the late 19th and early 20th century industrial operations. These shops evolved into specialized facilities where machines which power the mills, such as steam engines, and also the machines that produce the goods, such as looms, for example, could be maintained and repaired. As stated previously, 13 was constructed circa the 1910s. Number 13 is typical of the machine shops which proliferated in the city of Paterson and expresses the design which contemporary professional publications recommended of the time. The 1.5-story industrial building was economically constructed from brick and timbers and inexpensive to maintain and operate. The large window bays that are now filled in open along the long sides of the building to illuminate the interior. The long, narrow design of 13 allows an overhead crane to move heavy materials anywhere within the interior, for example. Materials could also be easily offloaded to the interior from rail cars or from trucks, for example. Small additions to the westerly and easterly ends of number 13 were constructed for storage. These were the typical uses and purposes of machine shops and industrial complexes in the early 20th century. So I'd like to show a few photos now as well. I'm going to switch over to the photo section again and give you a sense of a view from the corner of Morris and Barber Street of 13. It's the building that you see on screen now, kind of right in front of you with the bracing at the right-hand side of the frame. This represents the portion of the building that is sort of where the roof is collapsed, and the walls here on the Barber Street side is sort of self-standing, and so the braces were installed there to give the walls some stability. And another closer photo shows some of the intact architectural details of the building, which include fenestration with these stone sills that you can obviously see. I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but I'm going over the sills right now with stone lintels, and then they've been infilled with concrete block over the years. And there's some very simple corbelling along each of the bays separated by these pilasters, giving the building its sort of very simple utilitarian architectural design features. Again, just another closer view of the condition of the building. These are photos that I took rather recently. They're not recent as of like this month or last month, but rather I believe they go back to about September. I do not have a photo to show you the current condition, but this photo will help me to demonstrate what I saw at this point. there's been a temporary barricade installed here along the curb of what you see in the photo to indicate to pedestrians not to use the sidewalk and to cross over and use the other side of the street because of the dangerous conditions that are here. So there's a barricade presently installed now. As you also may know, the Morris Street School project is now in use and is operable, and we do have students occupying the building and actively using the street, meaning Barber Street, for pedestrian access. I believe this is a photo that was presented in 2017 during the Art Factory's site plan application to the HPC and to the planning board. And of the photos, I was able to pick this one out, which I believe is an interior view of the of Building 13. So this is there's always space here in front where the cars are parked, and this is the kind of farther end of Building 13 that is not the end that I showed you with the collapsed roof. So just again another visual of some of the architectural details in this building. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this one, but this is a kind of a Google photo. I'm going to try to blow it up, but the resolution isn't well. Building 13 is here, and I believe you can see the area of the building that's in collapse, or where the roof is collapsed. It's in the bottom right corner of Building 13. I'm kind of going around it here with my cursor, Building 13. And this portion that I'm going around now shows the collapsed roof. So again, this is just some photography to give you some more familiarity with the context and the location of the building on the larger complex. Building 13 as a machine shop is an ancillary building to the main mill spaces where the work occurred and the products were made. But all of these ancillary buildings obviously have a purpose to supporting the operations within the main mill buildings. We have other ancillary buildings on the complex, as you can see in this photo, that we don't need to get into describing. So I was able to give you a little background on the history of the property and of the building and of it itself and its context as a machine shop to the larger operation. I've been able to show you some photos to show its context within the Great Falls Historic District along Spruce Street. It's within the designated boundaries of these districts, so it's in the Commission's purview to have a look at this application tonight. I'm going to switch back over to the other document I was showing you, because now I'd like to show you our City of Paterson Land Development Ordinance under the administrative enforcement section, where we call this is the part of the zoning ordinance we call the historic preservation portion or chapter, and it defines a lot of the standards for the different types of applications that we would see. And number 6 here on screen now are standards for demolition. So standards for demolition, I'd like to go over these so the commissioners can keep these in mind as they're listening to the professionals give their presentation, and just take into consideration some of the information I've given as a background. And these are the standards that we have published. A permit to demolish. A permit to demolish a designated historic site or an improvement in a designated district must receive 5 favorable votes, majority of the commission membership. B, considering whether to approve or disapprove an application for a permit to demolish a designated historic site or an improvement in a designated historic district, the commission shall be guided by the following considerations. So you see the numbers here, 1, they go through 9 through 10, there's 10 of them. And number 10, I just switched to another page, is kind of pertinent here. In cases of questionable structural integrity or soundness, whether opportunities for investigation and remediation have been pursued and exhausted. And number 9, let's see, here we go. In the event that is number 8, in the event that a structure is unsafe or unsound, so as to pose a danger to health and safety, even invoking the emergency power section of this ordinance can be used. The effect on the remaining portion of the building, structure, site, or object or landscape should be considered. The structural soundness or integrity of the building, so as to comply with the requirements of the Uniform Construction Code. The probable impact of its removal upon the ambiance of the historic district, the extent to which it is of such old, unusual, or uncommon design, craftsmanship, texture, or material that it could not be reproduced or could be reproduced only with great difficulty. Number 3, its importance to the city and the extent to which its historic or architectural value is such that its removal would be detrimental to the public interest. And then number 1 and 2, its historical, architectural, and aesthetic significance and its use. So I just wanted to show these to you and go over them really quickly. Under section C, which I believe is the last section under the standards for demolition, this points out that the commission, if it approves a demolition, it may require archaeological and architectural documentation and or monitoring of the demolition as a condition of approval. And these activities would be in compliance with cultural resource and archaeological practices as required for compliance with the New Jersey State Historic Preservation Office standards. The past, especially when looking at an overall adaptive reuse application, there is often a request for demolition of an ancillary building on an industrial complex in order to accommodate the larger reuse goal or vision for the complex. So the conditions for the demolition are often predicated upon a high level of documentation of the structure. We have a lot of different guidance on how to accomplish this that is provided by the State Historic Preservation Office, for example. There also may be archaeological requirements depending on the potential for the site to reveal archaeological data during or after the building is removed, for example. So again, standards for review of this application because many of these that we've gone over here will apply. So with that said, I believe that we have the benefit of hearing from Mr. Cullen, a structural engineer, and Ms. Masucci, a registered. That's correct.
I do have two witnesses who are going to be sworn in and
Confirmed.
according to your rules.
Go ahead, Mr. Rubin. Go ahead.
The first witness I would bring would be Jeannie Masucci, who is a licensed registered architect, to give an overall look at building number 13. And I do have, after Jeannie is finished, I have a structural engineer who will testify. But if Jeannie can be sworn in by your counsel, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Ms. Jeannie? Legal, can you please swear the
Thank you.
Ms. Masucci, since you have not been here before, could you give the board benefit of your professional credentials?
Yes, I'm a registered architect in New York and New Jersey. I've been practicing for 35 years. The majority of my work is in restoration in the city, and I am what is known as a qualified exterior wall inspector, registered with the city of New York, which gives me the opportunity to inspect buildings for structural integrity and water damage and whatever else, which I do every 5 years with their local law program, and pretty much that's what I do.
I would ask that Ms. Machudi's qualifications be allowed by the board.
Confirmed.
Good, thank you. Moving forward, Jeannie, tell us what is involved with building number 13. Give us an overall look first at the building.
Well, as we know now, there's been damage to a portion of the building, which you can actually see that the roof has collapsed. And what is remaining in the area where the roof has collapsed is being supported with a series of pipe scaffolds and would not be able to stand on its own. So that portion is only there because of the shoring. The exterior wall in the same area, the one that we talk about on the south side, is being braced with shoring because it is actually listing out away from the building towards the street because it's not being held back with the roof structure anymore, among other things. This area, there's nothing really there that you could say could be salvaged and put back into place in the area where it's damaged. And when you then kind of walk along the side of the building, heading towards the west, you would notice if you look at the brick and the mortar that is part of the wall, that a lot of that is already damaged to the point where it's no longer viable either. It's standing in place, but its ability to actually, afford any long-term structural support is not really there. There's a lot of mortar washout, and a lot of a good portion of the brick is spalled or cracked and would not be able to stay in place even if the building was otherwise okay. You would have to replace those areas of brick and mortar to make it, waterproof at this point. So I'm not sure. I know that Dominic was going to touch upon the actual structural issues, so I don't want to be redundant or anything, but if there's anything in particular that you wanted to ask me, I'd be happy to accommodate you. I would say that what's there is not viable at this point. It's dangerous, and you can't really put it back together yet.
Jeannie, I think the main question that has to be answered, according to the ordinances of the city of Paterson and the state construction code, is this a viable alternative in demolishing building number 13? Is this something that should occur?
Yes, absolutely, because
Well, let me finish the question. So, for the safety of the rest of the buildings and pedestrians and anyone else in the area using the sidewalks or street, is it the safest way to handle this situation by demolishing this building?
Yes, I'm not even sure how you would try to go about putting it back together again, because as I said, those areas that are there are not structurally sound. They appear to be walls, but if you get close enough to them and run your fingers across the mortar or touch the brick, you realize that even what's there is not viable. And so it is my opinion that with it listing and without a structural support for the exterior wall or for the roof, that it really should come down, because I don't know what you would expect from something in such great disrepair.
And because the ordinance makes a point of it, is there any way to put this back together again for the historic piece of what we have in the Great Falls Industrial Park?
I must tell you that with the windows blocked up, there are a lot of damaged lintels above, and some of them are even missing. So you don't get the benefit of keeping that in place. A lot of the sills are damaged. Some of them have been replaced, I guess, in the past. And I don't see any value to what we have with the fenestration, quite frankly. And except for some corbelling, I don't know if there's anything really there at all.
Thank you. Those are the questions I would have, Mr. Chairman. If any of the board members or any members of the public have any questions, Jeannie would be glad to answer.
I think we should continue with your second witness, and then we'll open it up to the floor for questions between both Eugenia and the subsequent witness.
Good. I would call Dominic Cullen then.
Yes, hello everybody. Can you hear me?
Cullen, you could just about hear you. If you could be sworn in by counsel, please.
Yes. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Cullen, since you haven't been here before, could you give the board the benefit of your professional background?
Sure. I'm a licensed structural engineer in New York, New Jersey, and 8 other states, and I've been a practicing structural engineer in New York City since 1997. My background is a general structural engineer focusing initially on museum and cultural projects, and then I started my own firm in 2009, and much of the work we've done is adaptive reuse and renovation of existing buildings, mostly 19th century buildings in New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that Mr. Cullen's credentials be allowed.
Confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen, tell us what we have here in building number 13. You have looked at it, you've examined it. Could you just first give us your general view of the building?
Sure. I'd like to share my screen so I can show the report that's we had issued on September 9th, if that's okay.
Certainly, and this is after you did a visual inspection of the building.
Correct. One of my staff engineers did the inspection, and I visited the site subsequently after that. So, building 13 is a one-story brick masonry building with roof framing consists of wood joists and steel trusses. The trusses bear on brick masonry walls that go down to foundations. And what we found, I'll just skip through the written portion of the report for now because pictures tell 1,000 words, is what we understand is that in 2012, Hurricane Sandy created a significant event for the structure, and there was a roof collapse that left the perimeter walls of the building unbraced. And what I mean by unbraced is when you subject the building to wind loads, the wind pushes on the walls, and we're relying on the roof framing to try and stiffen the top of the wall. Without that, the wall is acting as a cantilever and it loses a lot of its strength. So the roof helps brace the walls and vice versa. The walls support the roof, so they work in tandem. So what we can see in photographs 1 and 2, and I think people can see this, hopefully it's big enough, is that there is a significant amount of collapsed area of the roof. The roof trusses, which you can see in photograph 1, are cracked and broken, the wood framing, and there's a substantial amount of temporary shoring on the inside of the structure. If that temporary shoring was not in place, that's shown in photographs 1, photograph 4, the remaining portions of this roof would have collapsed. In particular, I would draw people's attention to photograph number 4, which is at the bottom of the page. And what we see here is a somewhat haphazard structural framing, and this isn't temporary shoring. Some of this is I don't want to say it's the original framing from the building, but the building had been retrofit. And what's happening is the roof is bearing on a series of steel beams that are short, they're currently short, but they're somehow connected back to columns. It's not the way a structural frame would be considered to be stable in any way. My concern would be that if you were to attempt to try to retrofit this roof and reuse it, there would be significant safety concerns for the workers during construction, as opposed to if it's demolished, it would be demolished by a machine on grade to keep workers away. So to try and reuse a portion of this framing would be extremely difficult, and I think would increase the danger of the space. So these photographs are of the interior. And then on the exterior wall where the roof has been removed, you can see that they've added a series of diagonal braces to prop up and shore the wall so that the wall does not fall outward onto the sidewalk. My understanding is that this shoring has been, it's temporary shoring, but with temporary things, they often become permanent or semi-permanent. My understanding is that this shoring has been in place since 2012. So to me, it represents a issue where it probably needs to be replaced. And my recommendation would be that instead of replacing the shoring, that this portion of the wall in this area be removed. The last photograph, photograph number 6, is an example of what Jeannie had mentioned in the previous, that even though there's portions of the brick masonry wall that are not shored or braced, when you look up close, you find that the mortar and is loose or missing, and the brickwork is starting to collapse. So it's not something that can be simply repointed with tough pointing masonry. This is something that even the masonry wall that from afar looks relatively okay, when you get up close, there's a significant loss of mortar bed and therefore structural and waterproofing integrity.
Is that the entire report that you rendered to the commission?
Yes. There's a written report as well, which pretty much explains it as well.
Right, and your written report emphasizes those items which you set forth in your testimony.
Correct, yes.
So the bottom line, Mr. Cullen, is that this building number 13 in the Great Falls Industrial Park LLC should be demolished for the benefit of the public and the safety of whoever is going to potentially repair, or pedestrians in the area, or whoever might be in the neighborhood, that this should be demolished.
Correct. I think it does represent a issue with the pedestrians. You cannot use the sidewalk on Arbor Street, but also the internal framing has deteriorated or collapsed. It would be exceptionally difficult to see how you could try to reuse it, bring it up to current state code, and to do the repairs in a safe manner.
Thank you. Those are the direct questions I would have of Mr. Cullen, and you have already Ms. Matucci's testimony. Those are the two witnesses we have. The only item that I would like to bring to the board's attention, the commission's attention, is that we did file an application with the construction code official of the city of Paterson to demolish building number 13. That application has gone through the administrative channels and is ready to be issued, subject, of course, to this historic commission's agreement and resolution that it may be demolished. But the construction code official has seen all of our documentation and agrees with our position, and as I said, is because of the ordinances of the city, is waiting for your decision on demolition. And if you so move and allow that, the construction code official is ready to issue that permit. If there are any questions of either of the witnesses, they are both on call to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Does that conclude your testimony at this moment?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so at this time, I'd like to invite our commissioners to the floor to ask the applicant questions or the witnesses based on the testimony that we were just given. And I'd like to, please raise your hand and the executive director will address you accordingly.
I see Rich Walter and I also see Vice Chair Rafael. So go ahead, Commissioner Walter.
Commissioner Walter?
I don't have questions for these two witnesses per se. I mean, I'll take their reports at face value. Not that I necessarily agree with everything, but I'll take their reports. But my question is to someone, maybe a lawyer, I don't know who. In 2017, I was on the board, and we had a big discussion on a plan for this building, and we were told, actually promised at that time, that that building was going to be rehabilitated at that time. I'd like to know what happened to that plan to rehabilitate the building back then before it got this bad.
I know we were before the board and the planning board as to the main building, the building we call the Art Factory, which has been significantly rehabbed and is now a credit to this to the city. I really can't comment on what was said as to building number 13. I do not recall what the testimony was.
Okay, well, I do recall that it was the testimony was building 13. They were waiting for insurance money, and as soon as the insurance money came in, they were going to rehabilitate that building. That was the testimony back then in 2017. I mean, I'm sure we can go through the minutes and find that testimony, but that's what I recall. And if it was taken care of at that point in time, we would now have gotten to this point in time.
I really can't respond. Because obviously it has not been repaired, and it is, well, you heard the testimony, it's virtually unrepairable.
Okay, Commissioner Rafael.
Well, just one more thing. Nothing is virtually unrepairable. I mean, if you spend money, you can fix anything.
You probably are right. But there's only one problem. It has to be repaired to the satisfaction of the Historical Commission's specifications and the state of New Jersey and whoever else has jurisdiction. So that might be a little bit hard to do.
Okay, I'm done. Kelly.
Thank you. I have actually a few questions, which prefer that I say them all and then answer, or go one by one?
Vice Chair, I think you can mention all of the questions and then
I didn't get a response. Thank you, Chair Tate. So the first question, and I should preface that the questions that I'm going to ask is not, this is just for the commission's benefit, get more information on what you're proposing and the documents that we received to review for your application. So the first one, your engineering report, or I should say memo, dated September 9th, does not really address or definitively answer that this building is not salvageable. It does not also mention that it is an immediate hazard to the public and or property goers. So the question would be, does the conditions of this building, as you're presenting this application, rise to that level as an immediate threat, which I think is different than saying not viable or it's at a loss. Like, I think there's two different things there when we talk about language and how we evaluate structures. The second question in your
I
testimony.
think we can, maybe it's better to take it one at a time, because I believe Mr. Cullen answered that, Kelly. I think he answered it, and then I think our architect, Ms. Masucci, also answered it. I think they both answered that question.
Yeah, if I could just add in the report, on page 1, we say, it's evident that the existing structural stability has been significantly compromised, and without the emergency shoring, it would have collapsed in the past. So I think that is from a structural engineer's perspective, that's probably as definitive as we get. We generally don't talk in terms of saying that it's an imminent danger to the public, because that would imply that we need a police there and so forth. The building is the remaining portions of the structure, and it's not really much of a building at this stage, are temporarily shored and braced to stop additional collapse, but the building has already collapsed to a certain extent, and without the shoring that's there, would have completely collapsed.
Thank you. So you would then agree that it's not an imminent hazard to the public for the reasons you just stated?
No, I would say that because it's braced and shored, and we understand that the bracing has been there for almost 10 years, which is not the intent of temporary shoring. It's not something that is going to require somebody to cordon off the street tonight, but it's certainly something that would be defined as collapse if you're reviewing the structure. And the roof, we can see in the photographs, and portions of the walls have collapsed. It's only the temporary shoring that's been installed that's keeping it from further collapse. But that temporary shoring has been installed for a long period of time beyond where it should be.
Thank you. The next two questions might go sort of hand in hand, and it sort of relates to my last question. But anyhow, in the testimony, the other bit of language is that, you kept saying this is not a viable project. So what does it mean by, destroying the structure is not viable? And with that, or not, let's say, you can't put it back together again. In preservation, reconstruction is allowed to a certain extent. There are several documented cases, not just in New Jersey, where reconstruction does happen, where they're using 50% or less of historic fabric. So I guess in the case of this project, how is that not a method that has been approached or looked at? So in what way is this building not viable when there are materials that can be either maybe salvageable, reused, reconstructed, etc.? I mean, this is a rather structurally simple building. And then that kind of ties into my last question. Part of demolition standards, or the standards, is, when you submit a demolition application, you should be able to provide, or be looking at what other alternatives did your team, or did the applicant, the entire team propose as an alternative to actually the demolition. I don't know if you can speak to that element of it, but I throw that to the floor.
I'm sorry, who's the question addressed to?
Oh, either one, maybe
Yeah,
Jeannie.
the two as a whole.
If I could just, interject for a second. We did look at what could be done to, salvage the situation, because that's what I do all the time. That's what I would do, is try to come up with a plan of how to remedy something first. But when you're looking at, it's when you get beyond even the structural issues, which, you know, you would have to rebuild the roof and the roof structure. When you get out to the walls and you look at what has happened to the brick, you know, would have to a large extent, be removed and then replaced. Because masonry materials last, you know, a long time, but nothing lasts forever. And depending on its exposure to the elements, you could have a rapid decline in its ability to keep water on the exterior of the building. And to this extent, I would say that the brick on the wall that is listing out is very damaged and not something that you would reuse. I mean, you would have to move a lot of the wall just to get it upright again, and you certainly would put the brick back in place. Does that help?
I would just add also, Jeannie, that it's a solid brick masonry wall, bulky white. If you were to reconstruct it, you're not supposed to reconstruct it as a solid masonry wall, so it's in essence to be a completely new structure.
This is
I have no further questions, thank you.
this is Chair Tate. Actually, I see Commissioner Corbel has a question, and I'll follow up with her after. Commissioner Corbel?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So,
Commissioner Corbel, your phone is coming in and out. Can you repeat yourself, please?
can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay, I'm sorry. Just piggybacking on what the other two commissioners have said. Regarding the, the 2017, when it came before the commission,
Can't hear Commissioner Corbo.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it just isn't coming through.
Commissioner Corbel, can you repeat your question? It kind of went out when you started your question.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I don't know what the issue is. Am I okay now?
Sound much better.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm like talking right in screen. So what I said was back in 2017, it's my understanding when it came before this commission, the shoring was already on building 13 because that had happened back in 2012, I believe. So my question is, we know that the shoring was only supposed to be temporary and that's what was holding it up at that time. Why did the architect at that time not mention that this was not a viable building? Because it was approved on the condition that this building remained. So I don't know if anybody can answer that question, but I just wanted to put it out there.
I don't know if we can answer it because the architect who testified that time is no longer the architect of record. We haven't seen those folks in a couple of years now.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if we could answer it because they just aren't with us.
Okay, I understand that, but I think it's reasonable that the commission take that into consideration. And the other thing I want to make is, can anyone answer, to your knowledge, has the city of Paterson officially issued a notice of imminent hazardous?
Now, that is an interesting question, if I can. What the city,
May I interrupt? There's just a second part to that. And has an official stated, the city of Paterson, that this building needs to be demolished? Thank you, I'm done.
I think we should answer that question, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I have, and then we filed it with the commission, a permit from the Department of Public Works dated August 18th, 2021. It was prepared, the permit application was prepared by Jeannie Masucci, our architect, for this site. And it says purpose, installation of construction items required to provide protection for pedestrian traffic, bar one, until the Historic Preservation Board approves plans to demolish 70 Spruce Street. They don't mean 70 Spruce, they mean this site. And it's signed by William Rodriguez, Director of Public Works. So the city apparently has agreed that this should come down, and they're only waiting for this board to take action.
Which, this is the executive director, I need to interrupt.
I'm not sure that that's what that means.
Yeah, I need to interrupt.
I'm in the middle of speaking, let me finish. And my direct conversation with the construction code official was exactly this issue, and who had told me without question, he will issue the permit for demolition as soon as this board acts. And I said, well, the board has to have a meeting, we have to have a hearing, the ordinances say we have to go through a process. He said he understood that, and he will await the decision of this board before, he says, he can't issue the permit without the consent of the Historic Commission. And we all agreed to that, and that's where we process the application, and that's what we're doing this evening.
This is Commissioner Simpson. John Franco, I have a question.
Do you want to respond to Mr. Rubin? Because I don't think that issuing a permit for demolition is the same thing as receiving official notice that this building has to be demolished. I think they're two separate things.
Commissioner Corvo, maybe my question to John Franco may clear this up. According to what I'm hearing from the testimony, this building is going to be demolished anyway. If we say no, they're going to demolish it. And if we say yes, we're going to demolish it. And that's what I'm kind of taking from the testimony. Is that what is that in truth fact, John Franco?
My response to you would be a little bit, let me just put it this way. I won't respond to you directly. I can respond this way. That might help clarify your question a little. And you can tell me if this is helpful, or maybe this you can help to reframe the question. The preservation, I'm not going to make comments about the testimony. Instead, I'm going to talk about the ordinance and the construction official and the role of construction official and the Preservation Commission, paraphrased from my knowledge of the ordinance. So the construction official does have really the sole authority in the city to kind of officially announce that in his consideration, a building is an imminent hazard, and he can issue an imminent hazard notice to a property owner that gives them the urgency to evaluate the hazard and ask the property owner to immediately prepare a solution, and to engage building professionals to help provide input on the finding of a hazard. And he can also provide a period of time that he wants a response. or that he wants the response about correcting the hazard that he perceives and identifies and kind of announces on paper in this process. So that has not been done ever in the case of Building 13, and it's been, this has been an issue since, according to the applicants, since 2012, and the damage being done by Hurricane Sandy. So we don't have an official record from the construction official, who's the city's representative in this kind of a situation, to respond to. Now, if we did, there's a part of the preservation ordinance that calls for what's called an emergency session. And it says that in the case of an imminent hazard declaration, the Preservation Commission will move this, will move quickly to meet with the construction official and the owner and call an emergency meeting of the board or particular members of the board, such as the chair, and have a quorum and have a quick meeting about the emergency situation. The construction official can also, kind of condemn a building, close a sidewalk, make the building be demolished. But usually, this is only in a very extreme case when, let's say, there's a fire and the building is just hanging on, and all the walls are unsupported, and a very quick decision has to be made because it really truly is an imminent hazard. So the construction official can move to mobilize the demolition powers of the city, for example, if the owner doesn't respond quick enough or if the hazard is that imminent. You can also vacate the property, kind of tell people to get out of the property, not occupy the building for safety reasons. You can do all of those things. And the historic building, the Preservation Commission needs to move quickly along with the cadence of the emergency to try to participate and provide input and evaluate the same kind of things that we're evaluating in tonight's application, the viability of the structure to be saved or salvaged, if there are other opportunities, the ability of the owner to mobilize these kinds of efforts, as opposed to simple, straightforward demolition. All of that will be discussed under emergency powers. So the emergency powers section is really for that kind of a situation, and that's also mentioned, as you saw in my report. It was part of what's under the standards for demolition, if that applies. So to your point, Mr. Rubin is testifying as an attorney. He's telling the truth about his conversations with the construction official, but the construction official is not here to tell us, to confirm Mr. Rubin's story or a different version of that story. So that is what it is, and I just want to mention that is the case. I want to mention that I have also had conversations with the construction official, and in those conversations, he is not seeing that this matter rises to the level of an imminent hazard and was something that needed to go through the normal process. The normal process is an application for a demolition permit, which then gets referred to the Preservation Commission for this hearing, as Mr. Rubin stated. So what could happen next, Kenny? This is my wrap up on this in terms of process, addressing what you asked me. If the commission doesn't agree to approve the demolition, then the applicant would turn to the construction official, and the construction official would need to, at that time, determine if his powers to call for the, kind of get into the imminent hazard portion of his emergency meeting portion, and that in that case, like his authorities over the Uniform Construction Code and his role as the construction official could take over with regard to the safety of the building and the need for the demolition. It doesn't leave the Preservation Commission out in the emergency powers portion of the ordinance, but in that regard, I guess to your question, that would be my
I just
answer.
lost the audio from John Franco.
Yeah, you have me still? You have me?
John Franco. Yes, and thank you.
Yeah, so that's pretty much just the way I would answer your question instead of trying to just fool around with the testimony and stuff.
No, you definitely answered my question perfectly.
Yeah, and it's gonna take some official action by the construction official that apparently Mr. Rubin says he claims that, he'll go along with the demo permit, but left to his own rights, he has not not put himself in that position. And we don't know if he's going to do that, after this application is heard tonight, should the application be denied. So that's how I would answer your question. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Walter, I just have a quick question for the witnesses. Executive Director, can you go back to the photos of the property?
Oh, Chair Tate, may I, since I have this permit on screen, can everyone see the permit?
Yes.
Before I move, may I just make a comment about this? Mr. Rubin did mention about this permit. It clearly says it's a Department of Public Works permit. It's issued by Mr. William Rodriguez, who's the Director of Public Works. It's a sidewalk closure permit, and it says just what he mentioned here, and it's signed by William Rodriguez, and he says that it's okay to close this sidewalk and put up the pedestrian barriers as long as it takes can remain in place until the Preservation Board approves demolition. This is not Mr. Rubin did finish his statement that this is not to be confused with a actual permit issuance by the construction official whose name is Jerry Laboza, not William Rodriguez. I just wanted to point that out to be clear. And now, what did you want me to do?
If you can go to a picture of the subject property from Barber Street.
Yeah, the photos I showed you earlier.
Yes.
Can you see the photo on screen now?
I still see the proposal and details, project details.
Okay, it'll just take a moment.
This is perfect. So my question for the architect and structural engineer is kind of a dovetail off of Vice Chair Ravel's question about alternative strategies to preserve the property. Have you guys explored any surgical or selective removals? I understand from your report that you're saying that the condition of the existing masonry acts as a cantilever at the points where they're not shored, and the condition of the masonry allows for deterioration that may crumble the actual wall or roof. My question is, has there been a strategy in place where there's a very procedural removal that remove the areas that were in question? For example, removing the roof at the points where it created a point load and where it channels the load on the joint between the roof and the masonry wall that would basically push out the shear wall. Is there a strategy where you can remove those pressure points and surgically remove the areas of that are in question to kind of alleviate any tension, almost creating a ruin? The problem with this area, and I'm speaking from a Historic Preservation Commission perspective, is we've dematerialized so many structures without fully understanding what could be preserved. And I understand this happened in 2012 and it's been stored for over 10 years. The problem is, going back to Commissioner Corbell's question, is there hasn't been any documentation showing that certain areas of this could be preserved until a subsequent strategy is put in place to either, rebuild, let's say, or some kind of adaptive reuse for this existing structure. There's a lot of history attached to these beautiful buildings, and I'm just curious to know: have you explored any selective removal, almost surgical and very strategic and specific removals that would alleviate the pressure that would create an imminent hazard to the public?
The Chair Tate, I know you didn't really frame that as a question, but this is a question period. Are you trying to put that out there for the engineers and architect to respond to?
Yes, I would like to know if they've addressed it in a way where they thought about removing certain areas, for example, removing the roof where there's pressure on the wall, or removing some of the masonry wall and leaving the areas that are intact so that the entire thing is not completely demolished.
I'm gonna ask Jeannie that question. She might be able to respond.
Yes, I would say that in looking at it, because my gut tells me to try to build and not take things down. I didn't get, in my experience, I don't feel that the area that is all the way to the west where the shoring exists, I don't think that that's, like Dominic Cullen mentioned, that it would be very difficult to put people in there to work because it would be considered dangerous just because of the condition that exists there. So in that area, I wouldn't even have considered it. It's looking at then further down, I began to look at what was there and said, well, perhaps some of the structure can remain in place. But then when I started to look at the masonry, it's sort of like, well, then you could just, keep, one beam and some bricks, and then you would have to get rid of a good portion of what's there, and then maybe, it goes beyond sort of like a skeleton remaining in certain areas. I don't think of that. I think of then how dangerous it is right now and how dangerous it will be to, the public as time goes on. If you're waiting for something to happen, that someday it would be, I guess, put back together. In the interim, it wouldn't be put back together. It would continue to deteriorate. The long-term plan for something like this is sort of like it's past that half-life, in my opinion, that you could do that. I don't know if that answers your question the way you.
For clarification, in theory, if you removed all sides of the structure, including the roof, except for the wall that we see there, would that wall fall down completely? I'm sure the area where the shoring is, based on your testimony, the deterioration of the masonry, there would be some issues with the structural stability of the structure. However, I think that a major portion, if I'm not mistaken, from your report, you cited that 50% of the structure is in ruin based on the Hurricane Sandy, and the other 50%, I'm assuming, based on that data, is intact and could be preserved in theory. So what I'm advocating is a selective removal of the areas that are cantilevered based on failed, weather conditions or points where the roof would create a live load and pressure at joints that push the wall out towards Barber Street. But I can't imagine that entire wall, and again, this is my opinion. I want to be clear here. This is not any structural advice or anything like that. That if certain components were removed, it would alleviate the pressure so that the entire structure didn't have to be removed. Imagine if the three walls surrounding it were removed and only the areas of the wall that are in.
Itself has its own issues. It's that's where my concern is about the masonry and how much water it could take in now, and then rapidly it would like take in more and more in the future. I think once the roof is removed, the roof that's there is not held together in like a structurally sound way. It is sort of pushed together and held together with shoring and the pipe scaffolds and everything to keep it together. If you remove that, then the wall gets to continue to move out away from the building. At what rate, I don't know, but it would continue to do exactly what it's been doing already down by where the shoring is. If you go to the very, very left side of that photo, there is a room over there with a wall that kind of separates it from the other portion of that building. That's fine, but I don't think that that's the area that's in question for what's going on, because that area sort of is standalone. It doesn't sit, like have the same structural issues because it hasn't suffered the same damage as the other area. I don't know if that makes sense, the way of saying it, but I don't think that there is any intention to remove that portion of it. It's just the room all the way to the left side.
Right. What I'm saying is I feel like that wall is not structurally in question completely. I think that the portions that you indicate in your report are critical, and those areas obviously have structural damage due to weathering, and the engineer put in the wind load pressures and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
But if the wall was cut down, almost like you're cutting a section through the wall, and some portion of it was to remain as a historic signifier of this structure, then I think that is an alternative that I would imagine could be explored, perhaps.
You know what? I'm not there with you, because I feel like I don't think that what is remaining in the wall itself, I don't know that it actually would just behave the way you want it to upon demolishing the roof structure. It is a fairly fragile situation for a good portion of it, depending on where you're standing and what portion of the wall you're looking at. And I sort of like a Swiss cheese issue, trying to find structural integrity to go with. I don't necessarily agree with that at all. I'm more thinking that what was there cannot be, it can't be saved from the roof portion, and so that would have to come off completely, and then you would have a wall that is already in disrepair and does suffer from some damage to the brick as it is, and then you want to know if it would be able to stand. I don't know that I could say it would.
Could that wall be supported on the other side?
If you want to put braces up against it and hold it in place.
This conversation.
But to what point? You couldn't use the space that you were bracing it in, so it would be like a sort of a showpiece from the outside. Is that?
Now we're getting into the historic preservation aspect of it. Once this building is completely removed, that 1899 tax map and the previous maps and the history of that is just completely lost. And I understand the nature of the assignment here. from our perspective, we're looking at, preservation as much as possible, considering we're one of the nation's first planned industrial cities. And it's just a question of retaining as much information and data in the Great Falls Historic District as possible. And I understand the impetus and the gravitas for this situation. It's just unfortunate that a portion of the city is lost again into the wind.
I would agree with, it being unfortunate, but at the same time, I think the best way for me to explain how I feel about that structure is that I spend time on scaffolds outside of buildings, 450 feet in the air without a problem, without fear. But when I'm inside there, I'm concerned about where I'm walking, what I might bump into. When I say fragile, I do mean fragile, in that area, and I don't consider it safe.
Right.
I would second that. We had mentioned that the areas where the roof had collapsed, that area shouldn't really be accessible to workers in its current state.
Right. Now, I understand that's a means and methods procedural thing. Is that something that you consulted with an external contractor, or was that just your professional opinion about the structural integrity of the subject weather conditions?
It's my professional opinion, but it's not means and methods. It's indicating to my client that what's there is precarious and they should limit access to that. What's in essence is now a courtyard because the roof is completely gone. Means and methods would be more for if they're actually doing demolition or doing new construction. I'm just saying that in its current state as is, I'm seconding what Jeannie said, which is limit access to that area because it's unsafe.
Is there anything salvageable from this ruin, if we call it? Is there anything salvageable, in your opinion, from this whole thing? In your opinion, does the whole thing need to be demolished? Is there any representation, any fragment of this that can remain as a historic marker that this building once sat in this industrial city?
Well, I can't speak for architecture, but I would back up what Jeannie said. As in this photograph, as you go towards if you look at this photograph, as you go from right to left, the portion of the building on the right-hand side up to the telegraph pole or telephone pole that you see, that's 100% on. From that point to where you can see it looks like a stop sign over right there where that edge of the wall is. That area is quite unstable, and from an architectural perspective, Jeannie spoke with respect to the fact that the windows have been infilled with CMU, and there is some brick detailing above, but the lintels have disappeared. My understanding is that the roof framing that exists there is unstable, and it certainly is not code compliant. So my understanding is that middle part, more than a third, would need to be demolished. Jeannie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the room you said that was more stable and was more standalone is pretty much to the left of that stop sign. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly where it is.
And that's the portion. I think it's actually a slightly separate. I think there's a joint there. I think it's almost a separate structure. That small portion at the back could be salvaged.
Yeah, that part is not. It's sort of not part of the sort of house of cards effect that we have going on from the other side of that stop sign, where I feel like removal of one thing will inevitably cause more and more structural issues, because that's what we have going on already. Because we're missing portions, entire portions of the roof, and therefore we're having failures of the facade.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my questions. I see a question from Commissioner Walter.
Yes. I'm wondering, Jeannie, at one point you had mentioned if they put interior bracing, it would preclude anything from any use in there. Is there a site plan? I mean, most of the time when we have a demolition, it's part of a site plan of things that are going to be done and what the area is going to be used for. Is there a site plan, or do you have an intention of using something on the inside of that building once the demolition is done?
I think that it's a question for the attorney. It's not something that I've been involved with.
I can answer the only thing we were going to use it was for parking, additional parking. There's no plan for any kind of construction.
Okay, usually when we have a demolition permit applied for and we go through the commission, it's part of an overall site plan. And I think the commission should see that site plan before we approve a demolition.
Well, I think we're going around in circles, so if the board doesn't want it demoed, doing a site plan would be of no value. I know we have to go to the planning board in order to get any new construction or any new parking areas, because that's what the planning board requirements are. And because it's in the historic district, it goes back here for the site plan, and I agree with that. So, but as of this moment, we wanted to see what our alternatives were on the demo, and then we'll see what the board wanted to do with that before we started looking at a new site plan. But at this moment, we were only looking at it for parking and nothing else.
Okay, but that seems backwards to me. And since this is not an imminent danger, I mean, it doesn't have to be done this week. It could be done next week or next month.
Yes.
I think we could have a site plan before this comes up for the demolition.
Well, I'm trying to read what the board is saying, and if the board is saying they're not in favor of demolition, I'd be wasting time, effort, and the client's money in doing a site plan if it has no meaning.
Okay, but we got our job to do. You got your job to do. See what happens.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see any more questions or hands raised on the board. Are there any more questions? We're still in the Q&A portion of the hearing. I just want to remind everyone. Are there any other questions that people have that have come up?
I don't see any hands at the moment. If that is the case, and we don't have any questions, for this application, did I hear a question? Does someone have a question? I'd like to open this up to the public portion. I'd like to, can we have our secretary provide the number to the public?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, one moment, please. Those who would like to participate in the public portion may call in at 973-321-1579 and enter meeting ID 711-680-001. Again, those who would like to participate may call in at 579 and enter meeting ID 711-680-001.
The time is now 8:08 p.m. At 8:13, within 5 minutes, we'll close the public portion. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do know that IT has one caller in the queue.
Please confirm with the call. Please open to the public, please.
IT has been so instructed, Mr. Chairman.
Confirmed.
Mr. Chairman, I am in communication with IT and I was told he's calling, so I believe we just need to be patient.
Confirmed. Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Yes. Is this the caller?
Yes.
Yes, legal. Can you please swear the caller in?
Okay, there's no need to swear him in, Mr. Chairman.
Confirmed.
Yes. Can I proceed?
Please proceed.
I've been listening quite attentively to the witnesses and it's concerning the structure. I've been looking at the structure for the last couple of years, and I'm looking at it based on the danger it is to the community, the children that go to school over there. And I'm talking to parents, I'm talking to the teachers, and everyone is feeling the
a situation. And the liability to the city, if this building comes down in any kind of way and someone gets hurt, is astronomical. I fully believe in the preservation board and what they do in this city, but this is a building that cannot stand the way it is any longer. I've seen the brickwork, I've seen the wall. I know about the roof going in. I remember when it happened, actually. And this is not something we can play with any longer. The letter that you received from William, from the Board of Public Works Director, William Garcia, Billy Rodriguez, I think it's clear that the city is letting you know that this building is dangerous and needs to come down. Although I also listened to some of the commissioners talking about surgically removing certain parts of the building, and that I don't believe that this building, from what I know of it, can be saved in that manner. As much as I would love to save this building, I can't look at us doing that at the risk of human life in that area. If we get a real good heavy snow, and you know how what kind of snow we've been getting for the last couple of years, I think this building's going to get more damage, and pieces of the building may fall down and hurt someone. This is not a situation that we can wait on. I think this board has a responsibility. The ordinance is clear. It gives you the guidelines for this type of demolition. The ordinance also gives you bullet points on what you should consider. I don't think at this point that preserving this building is an option. People in the neighborhood are very nervous, very scared, and I spend most of my time as a public advocate for neighbors, residents of the city, and this building is a dangerous building. Keeping this up and something happens, the city would be liable. And there would be no way around it because your board says, leave it up. We need to take this building down. We need to take it down now. I agree with the applicant that this building should come down. I believe that you guys really have a very simple decision to make on this one. It cannot be saved. There's nothing we can do. As much as I would love to save that building, I'm more nervous and more concerned about the safety of pedestrians, children, school children that walk around. No barrier keeps the kid out. Kids will go under the barrier, around the barrier, pick at the barrier. So, I mean, this is not a situation that I believe that we can just ignore for the purpose of saving the structure. I've never had to call into this board because I've agreed with you on just about most things that you've done, the way that you've done. In this case, I think it is entirely too dangerous to play with this building any longer. It needs to come down, and you need to take into account not just the architects or the engineers, but the citizens around that building in that area that are very nervous because they don't know when that building is going to collapse. I'm not an expert, I'm not an engineer, but in my 45 years of advocating, I've never seen a structure that needs to come down more than this structure that we're talking about. I'm asking you very nicely to consider the safety of the residents of the city. Although your job is to preserve, the preserving of life, I think, is more important than preserving a building that is crumbling. I've heard nothing about the foundation. I'm not even sure if the foundation is solid. But if we do get a heavy wind and a heavy snow, that can create a very dangerous hazard. And this board has been made aware of it. And I think you guys need to act accordingly in this situation and take down the building before someone gets killed and the city's held liable.
Thank you. Does that conclude your call?
I think it does. I think I've expressed a desperate need for the safety of the residents over preservation of a building that's structurally unsound. This is not, again, I understand your mission, but my mission is to advocate for the residents of Paterson. And we may have two different missions, but I think this particular building, you have enough information and evidence that this building is not safe. And I think you need to take that into account very strongly. I urge you, before something happens, this building's been decaying for years, and it's gotten worse every year. And we just cannot take the chance that anyone can get hurt. And you guys have been made aware of the situation. And how you handle it now is very important, and especially to the safety of these residents. Yes, and at this point, I am finished.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Secretary Henderson, do we have any other calls? Can you find out from IT?
Mr. Chairman, IT has confirmed there are no other callers.
Okay, so at this moment, I'd like to close the public portion. Secretary, do you have a prepared resolution statement of purpose for this application?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman. Resolution number 2112 is the conditional approval of a demolition review application for the property located at 9-11 Spruce Street, Block 4802, Lot 22.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on the floor for the prepared resolution?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
This is Rich, just to get this going, I'll second.
Secretary Henderson, did you get the motion in second? Vice Chair
Confirmed,
Bell?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So at this point, I'd like to announce that the discussion is open on the floor for this resolution.
Hey, Commissioners, it's the director. So, as a reminder, sometimes when the hearings get long, we forget where we're at. We've heard testimony from the applicants. I gave you context and background as a report to set things up. We had a Q&A. We had some public input, public comments. We've had the prepared resolution moved and seconded, so it's time now for discussion among yourselves. The applicant and the professionals will not interrupt you. This is your time now to discuss the topics that are on the table for discussion, so that everyone can have the benefit of your input with regard to taking a vote or taking action on this application.
So this is Chair Tate. Firstly, I do want to acknowledge that the caller that called in, their sentiments, I completely agree with, the safety aspect of the said structure that we're actually reviewing at this moment. And that takes over everything. My question harkens back to one of the earlier questions from, I believe it was Commissioner Corbo, relating to the fact that this structure was first in question after Hurricane Sandy, which I believe was in 2012. And subsequent to the disaster, the building has been stabilized the best that the building could be supported, given the conditions that happened then. And I understand since then it's at a point now where it's kind of on its last leg, so to speak. My only input on this is what could be salvaged. I understand that the majority of the structure, from where the bracing is, at the upper portion of the wall, where the roof is, where the live loads would create the cantilever at the wall would create a hazardous situation. But I'm just wondering if we could create a low wall situation where there's a minimized danger or some way to preserve some of the existing fabric, historic fabric of this without any safety hazard in place. And that goes back to Vice Chair's question regarding the alternative measures and techniques to kind of preserve it. The engineer and the architect, they put in their report and subsequent in their testimony that they don't believe that workers should be in that area. That's outside of our scope. You know, I can't really comment on that. That's you know, that's beyond you know, what we do here. And I just wanted to put that on the floor. I see Commissioner Walter.
Yes. Unfortunately, I think this building, in the most part, has to come down. It is in very bad condition. The engineers are absolutely right in the condition of the building. I think, to follow along with Commissioner Tate's suggestion, maybe a bay or two in the front area could be saved with a plaque attached to it to commemorate what was there, but with one section of the wall, you know, maybe one bay or two wide, standing. That could be a condition. I also think we need a archaeology report done, an in-depth archaeology on that site and what it was. I also, I don't know if we can do it, but there should be a site plan. I said that earlier. There should be a site plan before we agree to anything being done there. Okay, that's my statement.
I just have a statement, Commissioner.
Yes, please.
I'm just a little concerned about the sense of urgency after 10 years. This wood bracing has been up for many years, through many storms, many historic storms that just previously passed. My concern is where is this sense of urgency coming from? I truly believe that this could be adaptively reused. It could be salvaged if there's some thought to it. Oftentimes, all we're met with is demo, but there's always alternatives. We've been doing this for many years. We've been seeing adaptive reuse for many years. I can't see how just demo is the answer to this. There has to be all the alternatives. There has to be something that could be done to salvage this building.
Thank you, Commissioner Simpson. And I see Vice Chair Rafael, but before you jump in, I just want to say I totally agree with Commissioner Simpson. I believe that there's a way to, you know, bring this thing back to life fully. Unfortunately, you know, we're up against this report, and, you know, the question about the sense of urgency, I mean, you do make a good point about.
We got not to cut you off, but we got a report the last time, didn't we? Did we get an engineering report?
Right, in 2017.
There was no sense of urgency then to knock it down with that report. And I'm pretty sure it was similar.
Vice Chair Rafael?
Kenny took the words out of my mouth. So, yes, I agree with. I mean, I guess this application's a bit like torn. Well, you know, I understand that to the applicants that it doesn't seem, you know, in right mind and maybe, you know, right, salvageable or it's too much of a hazard, but, you know, it has been a long time. What is the sense of urgency? There was, and maybe I missed it, but there was no sense in what was provided, information for me, saying that they looked at alternative measures. And I'm talking even like, okay, let's preserve this as a ruin, for example, let's say example. Or like what is, you know, to Kenny's terminology, adaptive reuse, like what is the plan for this building? Because, okay, we're gonna demolish it and then what? It's gonna be a parking lot. Not saying it is, but, right, like those are things that we have to take into consideration. So I'm a little bit split on that factor. And then moving forward, which looking at the time, we've been here quite a bit, as John Franco mentioned. We can spend another few hours talking about mitigative measures. Like, okay, we're going to approve this demolition, so what are we getting? What are we going to get in return in terms of, right? This is a historic resource that we're losing in the district. It's a valuable historic resource within the district. A historic marker. Rich Walter mentioned an archaeology assessment. But maybe it needs to be like a cultural resource report where we have historic information. Those things do take time. So how does that fit within the applicant's time frame? I do also think that from the testimony and the back and forth regarding the construction official and what the city's review outside of the HPC has been, I think without those details, it would be hard for me to, make a determination.
Thank you, Vice Chair Rafael. And just to add on top of that, I see Commissioner Mohammed has a comment. I just want to say that going back to Commissioner Simpson's question about the urgency, the reality that we're facing is another demolition, and we had previous reports. This has been in limbo for over 10 years. If we demolish this building, who's to say that in the future on that site there's another building that we need to demolish? And I just want to make sure we're taking the proper assessment of everything so that we're not dematerializing the historic district piece by piece when we received information in the past that could have prevented such measures. Commissioner Mohammed?
So, see, my thing is the customer presented in 2017 and they talked about plans to actually develop this, but it never happened. The question is, if we do reject this demolition, we really don't know when is the next time they are going to show up. And there's a lot of students that, you go at 2 o'clock, you go at 3 o'clock, there's a lot of traffic there. There's a lot of foot traffic. And to rely on the developer to come back, that is always my big fear. So that is something that I just wants to bring to the commissioners to keep an eye on. We should look at options to salvage maybe a certain portion of the wall, but relying on the developer to come back and to rehab this, that is something also we just don't know what's the time frame of something like that. Ever happen.
Commissioner Mohammed, this is Kenny Simpson. I just want you to also understand, because you're 100% correct about pedestrian traffic and safety, but also the sidewalk adjacent to the building is crumbled granite rock. So you mitigate one issue, but you still have another issue regarding pedestrian safety there. So I just want to make sure that I point that out to you.
And maybe we could bring some of what we want around that area as a condition.
That's why we need a site plan.
Some kind of agreement on something, not just words. So.
Because I think Commissioner Mohammed, just to piggyback on what you're saying, we relied on that at the previous application. We relied on
that was a mistake.
And then we left with a structure for 10 years.
And that's my bigger fear, that we're gonna have the same thing, unless we get a site plan to see what's the future holding. It's very hard.
Yeah, and as well as the site plan, I think, some kind of phasing should be attached to it where, going back to Vice Chair Rafael's statement, and also Commissioner Walter about preserving some portion of it, like maybe 2 bays, phasing out maybe if we do have to go to the demolition, what's the phasing strategy? This thing is going to be taken down in portions, presumably. What if the most hazardous areas are demolished, and then when it becomes less dangerous to the public right of way, the areas that are intact could be stabilized with some kind of shoring so that those could be preserved and the entire structure is not removed, and then we could place some kind of marker indicating what the actual structure was previously.
But Commissioner Tate, this is Commissioner Simpson again. We keep talking about safety. The bracing and shoring is unsafe itself. There's no advance warning. There's no closure of the sidewalk. There's so many things about this site that's unsafe in itself, and not even just a wall. The bracing is going across the entire sidewalk. I've never really seen any bracing like that on a city street before. So I just want to point out there's so many deficiencies on this site that I 100% agree with Commissioner Walter. We need a site plan so that we can adequately address this application.
Confirmed. I see Commissioner Corbo had her hand up at one point. Commissioner Corbo?
Great.
Your volume is a little,
Can you hear me now? I'm concerned about the safety issues like everyone else, but I agree that we need a site plan. I also like your ideas of maintaining some semblance of the building. And to be honest, if we get a site plan and it's for a parking lot, I am not going to be really in favor of just a parking lot. We're seeing too many historic buildings come down. And my concern is with any conditional approvals that we put on this, that the same thing is going to happen that happened in 2017, which is that it wasn't done. The onus should be on the owner and not on us for the safety, because he didn't do what he said he was going to do. And that's why the building is the way it is now. And it's unfortunate that it may very well at this point have to come down. But I don't think that we should be able to reward someone for that.
I honestly feel that if this was in such an imminent danger, this building would have been gone. So it's been here for 10 years. I don't see the urgency.
This is the director.
We agree with you on that, Commissioner.
This is the director. I'm going to try to add a little context to the conversation. Again, a little procedural stuff to interject to kind of help you in this discussion. Site plan application to the planning board that was referred to preservation for review and advice to the planning board in 2017, and there were architects who did the drawings that were testifying on behalf of the applicant. I don't remember that the applicant was even the owner was even present at the meeting. I don't believe there's any testimony collected from the owner at that meeting, nor has there been at this meeting, frankly. However, he is allowed to hire agents and attorneys and professionals to represent his application, and that's bona fide how we proceed. So in effect, it's what we've heard is like he's behind that testimony. The owners are behind the testimony of the professionals and the applicant, the way it's submitted, and the professionals that he engages to help kind of interpret his vision to this board. So in 2017, that happened. I'm going to, again, as Rich Walter did earlier, we do have minutes. There was record made of the meeting with minutes, not with a transcript of exactly what was said. But I do also recall that there was direct questioning of the professionals about Building 13 because it was in this condition even at that time. And according to the testimony from the applicant's team, these damages to the building, occurred in 2012 or after the Hurricane Sandy. And the shoring that we talked about this evening in the building was installed probably shortly after that with the effort and intention of salvaging the building, of going to fix it later. To say when we have, insurance on the property, we're going to apply for insurance coverage, and when we get that, we're going to fix it. Now, that was a testimony 5 years after Sandy. That was what was put on the record under oath. So it's not for necessarily me to say it was true or not true, but what we see as in terms of results is nothing has happened, and the conditions have been more and more deteriorated. The idea of the site plan that was presented to the planning board with the endorsement of the commission was based on the testimony provided at that meeting in 2017. And the idea of the site plan is to look at a myriad of preservation issues on a site-wide basis to inform an adaptive reuse plan that the owner has a vision for and is going to finance and fund. They usually don't spend money on doing site plans without the intention of actually moving forward with construction. I've looked at the record. The record has shown that there was, during the 2017 meeting, there was a questions about, what were the immediate interventions or needs for changes to the exterior of all the buildings, and there was really a couple of topics. One was a sign, and the other was the changing over of an entrance, creating sort of a main entrance for people, not for cars. And it was something that was very attractive and amenable and well thought out, and the commission was really supportive of that change to an entrance. Well, after the planning board application was through, we did actually get a permit for design review of that entrance, as was discussed, and we provided, according to the application materials, an approval for it to go forward, to get a permit. Well, that never happened. There was no entrance created. There was actually a very cool sign installed at one point, even without a permit or review by preservation, but it was actually a very nice and appropriate sign. And before we even talked about reviewing it or anything, it was removed. And then there was no sign. Now there's like a kind of a banner posted on the chain link fence in front of the vehicle entrance. So the record shows that there's been no activity other than what I just mentioned. I wanted to be fair, so I wanted to mention that the record on the activity. I didn't want to say there was absolutely no activity. That's the record of activity administratively that we have on record. There's also the statements that have been made. So just to finish up on that, we have every kind of fair expectation that the review of the site plan, which we engaged in and supported and passed on to the planning board, which then they also had comments on, it wasn't finished. Like, the site plan approval was not completed. There's still open items on that site plan approval at the planning board level. This situation, from the testimony that was provided in 2017 to both the planning board and to the commission. So the applicant now, in going back to the planning board for a site plan, for example, that's been talked about, would be looking at an amendment to an existing application, okay? So that opens up the greater topic of, well, what's going on with this application? And where is the work going? What are the intentions of the owner in moving forward with the work and completing the site plan? So I think those are questions at large, and I wanted you to know that going to the planning board for a site plan review or submitting an application for that isn't as easy as just how you might be thinking about it, where they have to show a site plan where there's a building 13, and then they say we're going to demolish it and build a parking lot here. And what do you think? That's the limit of the application. It's more than that, because this is an amendment to a current site plan. So they might have to remove the entire site plan that they invested in off the table in order to move a new site plan forward that says, well, we're doing nothing except demolishing one building and putting up, a parking lot. So there's some definite decisions that need to be made by the applicant with regard to thinking about overall site planning. And overall site planning is very important to preservation because we are able to mitigate and exchange values within the overall application when it comes to situations of demolition and frankly, egress and public safety and some issues that rise to the top of the list when it comes to architects and informing and guiding in a professional way any application or site plan approvals involve their knowledge of the Uniform Construction Code for site plans, because they feel like the overall picture would be helpful in determining the ongoing fate. If we continue to just get a demolition permit and then another demolition permit and then one for the smokestack and one for the next building, because everyone, including the public and the owner, is just standing around looking at the buildings deteriorate, that's really not the mission of the board, to continue to react in a, kind of the way Commissioner Corbo said, in a positive way to, dealing with the public safety concern that seems to be, the issue of the moment. So I wanted to give you some more information about the record and the need for the site plan and so on and so forth. Now, the owner is ultimately responsible in every single case for the interior safety of their sites, and when their sites are on the property line, the safety concerns to the public, to not have their property fall, and hurt people that are in the pedestrian right of way, for example. The construction official is our, kind of leading and highest authority that we depend on in the city to mitigate these kinds of issues. It's not the Preservation Commission and it's not the Planning Board. The fact that, we're here now to, be talking about these issues is definitely appropriate, because of the guidelines that I showed you earlier. We've talked about so many of those topics right now. A lot of the questions that were asked really related to those topics. Considering safety, considering UCC guidance, considering the viability of the building, but also considering alternatives to demolition. And you've all been talking about that as well. So I wanted to tell you, you've all did a really good job with regard to addressing the parts of the standards that are given to us on the topic of demolition. Now, with that said, I want to mention one more thing before to help give some context here. If you're not feeling comfortable with approving this demolition and developing for like one of the commissioners said, over the next 2 hours, a set of conditions, then I believe that it would be appropriate to say you're not ready to approve a demolition. You'd rather have the applicant explore alternative options. Some of those options could be demolition with certain mitigative measures, just like has been talked about, the plaques and the markers and the reports. Those are all mitigative measures, okay? That's something that we could do offline with the applicant, and we could explore that and then bring it back for a much quicker posturing for you to consider. In addition to that, they could also be considering alternative measures to demolition. There's a lot of input that you provided and you discussed, and you might ask them to have their professionals look into that. And kind of come back and expand this conversation more after there's been time to think and talk about it with their professionals. And of course, the staff, I would be involved in that and helping with that process as well. So this is something that we could take up again, given more information and more forethought. So I think that's also a possible alternative than feeling like you need to, simply approve this because there's a public safety issue. That public safety stuff is not the primary responsibility of this board. There's been a lot going on before it came to this. The construction official has really not played an active role in all the different adjectives that have been used throughout the meeting by all the different folks who have spoken. Where's the construction official in this? It's an important part of this as well. And he's still there, even after this meeting is over. So he can, take a role. And if he takes a role and we move into the emergency matters portion, then we do. That's how it goes. But as it is, this is a standard permit application. And all the things we discussed are on the table, that were discussed in this meeting are on the table. So I'm just trying to provide some additional guidance for everyone to hear about, so that I can help to wrap up some of the loose ends that have been talked about. So with that said, you may want to think about some of the alternatives before you make a decision, or you may want make the decision. But coming to all the different conditions before doing a conditional approval might be very difficult tonight based on all the different opinions. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Executive Director. I think that clarification,
Excuse me, my name is Dave Garcia. I'm the applicant. Can anybody hear me?
we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Michael Rubin, you're my lawyer. Can you hear me? Michael Rubin, you still here? If Michael Rubin's not still here, then I'm not going to talk anymore. But
He appears to be on the call, but we can't hear him. Michael?
Michael. All right. All right, folks. Well, I'll talk with my lawyer then. Thank you.
I believe he just said something. Mr. Rubin?
Yes, I'm right here. I'm right here.
Mr. Rubin, do you want him to be sworn in?
Yes, if Mr. Garcia has some comment, he should be sworn. He has not had an opportunity to speak in these proceedings, and since you've been speaking about the owner.
Yes, I'm Dave. I'm here.
If he can be sworn by counsel.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Now, my name is Dave Garcia. There's only one thing I want to say. I hear everybody's commentary today. I'm not going to comment on anybody else. I'm not going to answer any questions. But I want to tell you that the testimony of our experts say that there is a danger for people, and I'm not going to accept that responsibility if you guys do not allow us to do what the application says. So everybody's talking about this and that and this and that, but I'll tell you, and Ernst Rucker, who is a member of our community, voiced the same concern that I have. So I just want it on record right now that if you do not allow us to do what our application is asking for, and then if there's a danger to the public, it's all on you. Just want to put it up just so my insurance company knows. Thank you, that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, so you're not answering any questions.
I don't think he's on the call any longer.
He is. He shows up on the list yet. He's muted, but he's not answering.
Are we still in discussion?
Yeah, we're still in discussion.
So my thing is, this was discussed in 2017. The applicant, David, has not done anything. If there was a safety hazard, he would have done it before. So what is the reason that this, it's not like this building wasn't there before. If there was a safety concern before, it could have been done before as well. So I think he's just trying to turn the tables around. So I just want the commissioners, you guys have the same opinion on that?
Yes. Commissioner Simpson.
Yes, and he won't answer any of our questions, so we can't even find out what his intentions were.
Commissioners, I think we're still in discussion period. That we should not be given the opportunity for further testimony. So with that, I think
Motion, I believe.
we have a motion on the floor. We either take a vote now or we rescind that motion. Personally, and just the last discussion point, I don't think we have enough information. I think we need to kick it back as any other application, that we want them to provide additional information, or whether it's an alternative, whether it's mitigated measures that we've discussed, because I think we are split on that anyhow. So that's my last comment, and if everyone's agreed, then I would rescind the motion from the floor.
And just to add on top of that, I think you made a good point, Vice Chair. I don't want us to lose what the Executive Director mentioned about possible mitigation measures post this meeting, vis-a-vis a table, so to speak. If the construction official is involved and we go into the emergency measures, then I think that we could deal with it that way, and we could come back, immediately within, whatever time frame it takes to kind of address this. The big question again goes back to safety. That's the big thing on the table. But as Commissioner Mohammed articulated, this thing has been in limbo for 10 years, and it's now an immediate question. And we're going off the testimony of the witnesses and the lawyer, but I do believe that the executive director's statement about finding a way to kind of address this in a much more comprehensive way, where there's certain individuals involved directly that could kind of help make a clear decision for the board.
Hey, could we add a time frame for them to bring a solution in like 30 days, 60 days, or something like that as well? Is that possible to add as a solution? As a provision?
I wouldn't even do it as a resolution. I don't think we have to do that. I think, we have a meeting once a month. They can follow the applicant, deadlines, which I think Gianfranco and Tim could handle directly with the applicant. And if the applicant wishes to be heard sooner, he can request a special meeting.
This is the director. To reinforce what Kelly said, that's correct. If you decide to rescind the motion, the applicant can come back with, after working together with staff and the professionals on providing additional information, they could request a special meeting. They could come to the next meeting. As a reminder, again, as a matter of record, this application has been developing for a period of at least 4 to 5 months. It's taken this long for the applicant to provide the necessary information to make a complete application, which included the testimony of these professionals. I don't know how we could have even had this conversation without the testimony of the professionals this evening. And it took a while. Even we were ready to schedule this a month ago, even October, frankly. And Mr. Rubin wasn't available at one point, and so there have been issues. And with regard to urgency, I just wanted to make sure that was also mentioned, that the application process just for this part of the application has taken a number of months on behalf of the applicant's information to make this a complete application and schedule this hearing. So those things are possible. To have us work more intensely with the applicant to provide some additional mitigative measures, for example, in order to help with the demolition consideration at another meeting, etc.
Is there a new motion on the floor of the commission?
No, it's the same motion at this time. It's still a discussion period.
Okay, I'm just trying to follow along as to what it's intended.
So usually, commissioners, at this point, you start discussing about conditions for an approval, or you can all call for the vote, and you can all vote no, and the thing will be denied. Also, there's the opportunity to rescind the motion and forego formal action.
You got so much energy.
Okay,
Read a book and
Chairman, this is Rich.
I
I was a second on the motion. I will rescind my second, if that's the best way to go.
Commissioner Simpson, thank you. And I think Rich and I, since we both made the motion, we'd like to rescind them. And do we make a new motion, because we didn't vote on it, correct?
Right. I mean, you could make a new motion to then table the application pending further information from the applicant. Have the applicant represent, for example. Would be a new motion.
I would like to make a new motion that we table this application until the applicant can provide further alternatives and mitigative measures, which they will work on with the HPC staff. and then present it at an upcoming meeting. I think that's it.
And this is Rich, I'll second that.
And we have a motion on the floor for, a floor motion for the, what Commissioner Rafael just stated. And we have a first and a second. It's time for discussion. If no one wants to discuss it, then you can call for the roll call.
I just wanted to add, since this is an important topic, just letting everyone know I'm available for any special meeting. Now, really, the ball is actually in the customer court. Anytime they're available to provide us mitigation, then I'm available for a special meeting. Just wanted to add that.
This is Chair Tate.
Withdrawn?
Sorry, was that who spoke?
Go ahead.
So this is Chair Tate, and I just want to say, from the board's standpoint, our jurisdiction is not, safety as the primary thing, although we're considering that. I think the direction that we're going is the right way to go. I just want to put that on, for the record.
Could you hear me, Mr. Chairman? I just wanted to make sure that the original motion made was withdrawn. I don't think that word was used.
It was rescinded.
Well, you can't really rescind, it has to be withdrawn. That's just a word of art.
Legal, can you confirm? Or Executive Director?
1 second.
This is Commissioner Walter. I don't mind, I seconded if we could change the wording to withdrawn rather than rescind. In my book, it's the same word.
It really isn't legally, but withdrawn is the appropriate methodology. And the second, you haven't voted yet on the second motion?
Well, you've interrupted the discussion in the second motion, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I guess you lost track of the legal way things are going here.
Okay.
It is
Commissioner
withdrawn.
Rafael, do you also want to make a statement for the record that you have withdrawn your moving of the primary motion?
For discussion on the motion, but, so I guess we should just do this all over again for the record to make it clear. I'm withdrawing my motion, for approving this application or the resolution that's before us. Rich Walter has seconded that request, and we have a new motion on the floor for tabling this application until further documentation is provided to the HPC, and then subsequently scheduled for another meeting for presentation.
With
And
the
without
appropriate,
further, Chair, I would request that we call a roll.
confirmed. And I would just add in, if I may, if it's appropriate, that we have the appropriate parties that the Executive Director mentioned earlier, whether it's a construction person or somebody to speak with the HPC staff as required. Is that clear, or?
That's a different issue, Mr. Chairman.
Well,
Yeah, actually, Mr. Chairman, we're right now dealing with the applicant. I'll be talking with the applicant.
Confirmed. Then I withdraw that statement. I think where we left off with Vice Chair, we should proceed.
We have a roll call.
Secretary Henderson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
In the absence of Commissioner Redmond, we'll be taking the vote of alternate number 1, correct?
Confirmed.
Commissioner Garcia Leon,
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes.
Commissioner Corbo,
Yeah.
Vice Chair Rafael,
Yes.
Commissioner Simpson,
Yes.
Commissioner Walter,
Yes.
Chair Tate.
Abstain.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for all the time you've given this application, and happy holidays to everyone. We'll
You
see
as well.
probably next year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rubin.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Chair, I'm going to interject for a moment that I am going to step away from the meeting for.
Confirmed. Thank you. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to move on to item number 3 on our agenda, which is the approval of minutes for November 22nd, 2022. Can we get a motion and second?
I'll move.
Do we have a second on the floor?
Okay, this is Rich, I'll second.
Secretary Henderson, we have Commissioner Corbo for motion, and second, Commissioner Walter. Can we have a roll
Mr.
call?
Chairman, roll call.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Garcia Leon,
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Corbo,
Yeah.
Vice Chair Rafael, absent. Commissioner Simpson,
Yes.
Commissioner Walter,
Yes.
Chair Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Moving along to item number 4, administrative matters. We'll start with A, committee assignments. This will be me. So I sent out to the commission the tentative allocations for the committees. Some of them are confirmed, and some of the unclear areas I actually located some of the commissioners in the various committees. Please review and get back to me or Vice Chair Rafael if you want to make any swap or if you want to join any alternate committee so that we can move forward and establish it for the following fiscal year. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see it because I sent it just before the meeting. So we'll talk offline regarding the assignments.
Okay, thank you. That was my question. When did you send it?
Yeah. So I sent it earlier. I captured as many of the fixed locations as I was informed about. Moving along to item B, which is the Design Guidelines Grant application in the Eastside Park Historic District. Executive Director?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I brought this topic up at last month's meeting. I wanted to give you a report back on this. Yes, there is an opportunity for an application deadline to the Certified Local Government grant program, which is administered through the Historic Preservation Office. It's an MPS program. It's not exactly the same fund we used several years ago to do the downtown commercial guidelines grant guidelines, but we also did apply to them for the Great Falls design guidelines, which are presently under review by us at the administrative level now. And we could use this opportunity to help us publish another set of guidelines for the Eastside Park Historic District. Now, if you recall, in 2014 when we passed the designation of the East Side Park Historic District for municipal designation, we also had to promulgate those design guidelines, which the commission did internally. So we have not had a chance to touch base with them. A lot of topics have sort of changed with regard to available materials, and we've seen some definite record of use and application of these guidelines over these years. And it's a great time to revisit their kind of structure and format, even in anticipation of getting the award of a grant to help us hire professionals to further publish and design and lay out and finally hold a couple of public input sessions as well. That would be the role of the professionals and what the grant would pay for. But the committee is really integral to working with us at the staff level offline, meaning in between meetings, to help develop opinions and input to a sort of draft review of the current guidelines, so that if we do get the grant and then hire professionals, we'll be all ready to go. We'll know what we can get off the ground running. So I look forward to putting together the application and submitting it in January, and also starting to meet with committee members in January to start on that process. I just wanted to touch base with you on that. We are also going to submit a grant application for Save America's Treasures for the Rogers Locomotive Works building, otherwise known as the Paterson Museum, for a lot of ongoing threatening conditions involving the roof and a lot of issues along the roof line that are really standing in the way of replacement of really important building systems like heat and air conditioning. So we're really hopeful that that award will also come through, so we can get that work done as soon as possible. We have similar conditions over at the Danforth Library. We did apply for and receive a grant award. We're in administrative review of the plans and specs, and we're hoping to be out bidding for the Danforth Library, shortly. Starting in January or February, so the work will be ongoing. So again, this is like owner stewardship of the city owns these buildings I just mentioned, and this is the kind of stewardship that owners have to be prepared for with regard to raising funds, striking up a plan, making an assessment of the buildings, and then addressing threatening conditions before they become exacerbated into conditions that where you have a real loss of fabric and get to a point where you can't go back and repair a structure. So that's the point of these grant applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions on item B from the commissioners? If we don't have any questions, I'd like to move along to item number 5, which is the committee reports. Item A, tours and events, January 19th, 2021. Awards dinner, Core George candidate review. Just a point, the vice chair actually stated that she would step away from a while.
I'm back.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. So last meeting, just to keep it brief, we had talked about. We realized that we did not have a candidate for the Grace George Award this year. I did send around to everyone kind of our list of awardees, and Joyce brought up a very good one that I wanted to present tonight. And of course, if the commissioners had any other thoughts, now's the time for that discussion. But if anyone here knows Jennifer Renew, she has done a lot of work in Paterson. She was a former Paterson educator for about 35 years. She taught children in grades 1 through 8th and in high school, specifically high school science. She also served as an athletic academic advisor, mentoring high school athletes because she herself, growing up in Paterson, was a Paterson cheerleader, and she's kind of like been couched as this cheerleader for Paterson. She's also a adjunct professor at Montclair State University, and recently her work has brought her to volunteer. She's a volunteer in park and storyteller at the Paterson Great Falls National Historical Park. She's authored Italians of Greater Paterson and Skate Key, which talks about her time growing up in Paterson, which is kind of how I met her when I came here. And started with the HPC. She had just released her book, and she was definitely promoting it and telling the story. She's always been an advocate and a supporter of our work and the work that the HPC has done. And I think that she's, a great example of what, Grace George embodies, being an educator herself. And I think she'd be a great candidate for this award. So I want to thank Joyce for bringing her nomination. And, I think that's what I have.
Mr. Chairman, can I also add something to the report?
Yes, please.
I wanted the commissioners to know that we did send out the letters to the designated awardees, and I followed up with them with direct phone calls, and they were all very grateful and expressed their thanks for the opportunity to be recognized, and that they, all will plan to attend the event. So this is usually how we get started. When we're about a little more than a month out from the event, and we'll start to put together the information about the different projects and interviews with the applicants, so that they can be presented at the dinner. So wanted everyone to know that they were really thrilled about getting notification of the awards, and that's kind of moving on at this point.
And just to add to John Franco's report, in addition to the Grace George nomination, Tim and I are going to meet on, just at least report in on Tuesdays, check in on Tuesdays, on, just to figure out how many people have reserved this week. After tonight's meeting, tomorrow we're issuing our press release. The flyer has actually already been posted to our Facebook page, but we were waiting for the last Grace George, nomination discussion before we kind of put, the press release and kind of really push the event. So, has anyone thought of any other Grace George nominations? What do we think about Jennifer? Because we would have to vote on it tonight so that we can get a letter out to her tomorrow.
This is Chair Tate. I think the nomination that you guys brought up by way of Commissioner Corbo is an excellent nomination. You said she taught in Paterson for 35 years and contributed in many ways towards our mission and Grace George. I'm fully on board. I think that I give my support.
May I add something regarding Jennifer? Just to update you more. She was born and raised in Paterson as well, and she went to Central High School where she was a chief cheerleader. And she has also written another book more recently called Colorful Journey, about growing up in Paterson and dealing with a lot of the history as well in the city. And that's her latest book. So I just wanted to.
Fantastic. That's great news. That's great to know. Was that Commissioner Muhammad or was that Commissioner Walter, I believe, wanted to contribute? If there are no comments on the committee report, then I'd like to move on to item number 6, old business.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would ask that either Commissioner Rafael or someone else make a motion to accept the proposal that the award for good graces should go to Jennifer.
I'm going to make a motion, that the 2021/2022 Grace George Award goes to Jennifer Renew.
I'll second.
Secretary, did you capture the motion second?
Confirmed, Mr. Chairman. Roll call.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Garcia Leon.
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed.
Yes.
Commissioner Corbo.
Yes.
Vice Chair Rafael.
Yes.
Commissioner Simpson.
Yes.
Commissioner Walter. Commissioner Walter.
Yes.
Chair Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. And I want to say thank you to Commissioner Corbo for doing due diligence to reach out to Vice Chair Ragani. Moving along to item number 6, old business and correspondence. Executive Director, can you please provide us reports for the Levine Reservoir Containment Project, a brief update, and also the Overlook Park lands transfer to NPS, also a brief update. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be very, very brief. We have been working with the Passaic Valley Water Commission, I believe I announced this at the last meeting as well, on 3 sort of different but related applications that need local review, and we are hoping to see one or some of them at this meeting actually. And we were just not able to make it with regard to the application materials. And but there has been a good, healthy amount of communication, and we believe that that next month's meeting will have like at least some, if not all, of the applications. So we may have a very kind of full and focused meeting as we did tonight in January for the Levine Reservoir and other related, Passaic Valley water applications. So that is moving along. In fact, I'll also just tell you that today, in fact, I received through the mail a roll of plans that go along with the site plan application to the planning board that are being referred to us, and a statement of, a letter of intent for the containment project. So again, looking forward to seeing that application, and I'll have a lot of information to provide to you to kind of bring you up to speed before that meeting comes about. The other topic, Overlook Park's land transfer, is something that I've been keeping you informed about for a long time. If you recall, we were at the city council meeting for first reading on the ordinance for land transfer. It was unanimously supported. Tomorrow, Tuesday, December 14th, is the date for the public hearing and the second reading vote on the land transfer. So I wanted to tell you that in the event that you might want to listen in on the meeting, maybe even call in and provide, comments if you wanted to, but it's going to be in the beginning of the meeting if the agenda goes as it's written, which it often does not, by the way. But second reading ordinances are always like kind of right up front at the beginning of the meeting. So if you wanted to listen in or join in to see how that goes along, get to the meeting earlier than later is my advice. So these are both sort of large public projects that we've been working on for a while, and I wanted to let you know that they're almost coming around to being completed or getting into the stage of local permitting. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, under old business,
Yes.
I just want to let people know in Eastside Park, the Pathways project, well, they haven't advanced too much on the pathways, but on the streets, they have made all the streets in Eastside Park one way now. Very confusing. And they've marked out parking spaces, not too many of them though. So we'll see what happens with that.
Thank you for this update. Commissioners, do we have any questions from old business, either for the executive director or even Commissioner Walter? I don't see any hands, so we'll move along to item number 7. Item A, which is, at that point, we're going to move to, we covered item number 7. We're going to move to public portion. Can we get a motion to open up public portion?
Okay, Rich, I'll make it.
All right, so I heard Commissioner Walter for the motion and Vice Chair Rafael for the second. Secretary, did you record that?
Confirmed, Mr. Chairman.
Can we have a roll call?
Commissioner Garcia Leon.
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed. Commissioner Ahmed.
Yes.
Commissioner Corbo. Vice Chair Rafael.
Yes.
Commissioner Simpson.
Yes.
Commissioner Walter.
Yes.
Chair Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. At this time, could you provide the number to the public to call in?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Those who would like to participate in the public portion may call in at 973-321-1579 and enter meeting ID 711-680-001. Again, they may call in at 973-321-1579 and enter meeting ID 711-680-001.
Thank you, Secretary Henderson. The time is now 9:26. There will be 5 minutes to call in. At 9:31, we will close the line. Thank you.
Okay, may I ask a question while we're waiting?
Yes.
It's directed for Kelly. When you mentioned that the awards dinner flyer was posted to the Facebook page, someone I know through Facebook said they saw it, but when I went to look for it, I couldn't find it. And now I can't even find the actual Facebook page for the HPC. Do you have the actual name?
Yes, I'm opening it right now. It's
Because I just looked right now and I'm only seeing like 2014 posts. It doesn't look like the right page.
is it Do you have at Paterson HPC? Use
No,
the at
I just looked up Paterson Historic Preservation.
No, we're the City of Paterson Historic Preservation Commission. It's kind of long, but so if you just type in the at symbol, Paterson HPC, it should come up to our page. I can always share it with you too.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, that's easier.
So there's also, and you'll probably look at the old one then that I set up a few years ago. That's what you'll probably see, and I never removed it.
Yeah, that's probably what I just saw, Rich. You're right. That's probably what I saw. But I know in the past I found it. Okay, I will try what you said. Thank you.
It's also posted to the Division of Historic Preservation webpage where John Franco and I put other official business also.
Here I am on my phone trying to figure out how to share it. All this technology.
Okay, Kelly, I found it. City of Paterson. That was the difference. Yeah.
Okay, Kelly, since you're not using that one anymore, I'll remove the old one.
There are no callers in the queue, Mr. Chairman.
Confirmed. I'm gonna give it just 30 seconds. Once we hit 9:31, we'll close it. We'll close down the public portion. Okay. Can we have a motion to close in a second?
I guess motion to close.
Second.
Secretary Henderson, we have Vice Chair Rafael and Commissioner Corbo for the second.
Confirm, Mr. Chairman. Roll call.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Garcia Leon.
Yes.
Commissioner Ahmed.
Yes.
Commissioner Corbo.
Yes.
Vice Chair Rafael.
Yes.
Commissioner Simpson.
Yes.
Commissioner Walter. Commissioner Walter.
Yes.
Chair Tate.
Yes. Thank you.
Motion carries.
Before we motion to adjourn, I just want to say thank you all. This year has been tremendous. As you can see from today's meeting, there's been several applications that we've come across. Some were, a little bit easier to handle, and some were a little bit more contentious. But I just want to say thank you for your due diligence and trusting me to hold this position for this year. And it's been gracious working with you, each of you, and also the HPC staff who we're in contact. I just want to say thank you so much, and I hope each of you all have a happy holiday, and just continue to be the great people that you are. With that being said, I'd like to get a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Secretary Henderson, did you capture the motion second?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Garcia Leon for the motion and Commissioner Corbo for the second. Roll call.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Garcia Leon. Commissioner Garcia Leon.
And thank you to Chair Tate for those words, and everyone have happy holidays.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ahmed,
Yes, happy holidays, everyone.
Commissioner Corbo,
Yes, and happy holidays to you all.
Vice Chair Raffel,
Happy holidays and happy new year, and looking forward to working with everyone again next year. And yes,
Commissioner Simpson,
Yes, have a good night, everyone.
Commissioner Walter,
Happy holidays, good night, yes.
and Chair Tate.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you all. I'd like to call this meeting adjourned at 9:34 p.m. on 12/13/2021. Thank you, public, and everyone who called in and listened. Have a great evening.
Good night, happy holidays, everyone.
Good
Thank you.
Good night, you.